Simultaneous with Nile TV's broadcast of this music video were transmissions from global satellite television showing footage of over 1 million Egyptians amassed in Cairo's Tahrir Square. The contrast between state TV and satellite broadcasters was stark, but not surprising.
When you look at the Egyptian state television, it's really, for many people, look at it a joke. You know, nobody takes that media seriously, and you see the huge contrast between the state media and the coverage from Al Jazeera and other satellite channels.
The Egyptian state television has turned to a typical propagandistic broadcasting. There's virtually no information about the protest. So the Egyptians right now are subjected to two parallel media discourses. The first shows Egypt literally up in flames, and on the other hand you've got footage of the Egyptian regime asserting their control of the country.
So now they're playing another card, trying to stir nationalist pride. It's the same strategy we heard from the Vice President of Egypt yesterday when he said the protesters and reporters were belittling and insulting Egypt. Sometimes the allegations are almost comical. The regime is saying protesters in Liberation Square are being paid $100 or 100 euros, or they're being fed Kentucky Fried Chicken. The chanting you hear, by the way, is Arabic for "they called us the youth of Kentucky." This, by the way, is the Kentucky Fried Chicken at Liberation Square. Yes, there is one, but even if it could feed hundreds of thousands of people, which it can't, it's closed and has been since the demonstrations began. But as frankly absurd as the idea of foreigners high on 11 herbs and spices trying to take over Egypt may sound to us, you got to remember, this is a dictatorship with government-controlled media that has been lying to its people for decades. And now one of those former liars, an anchor for state television, has come forward, resigning her job, putting herself at great risk because she can lie no more. Her name is Shahira Amin. Until last week, and she was an anchor on state-run Nile TV. I talked to her earlier tonight about how the lies get spread.
I had a program on television and I was given a press release from the Interior Ministry saying that the Muslim Brotherhood had instigated these protests, and I knew for a fact that the Muslim Brotherhood had opted to...
For years their opinions and demands from their government have been ignored. They could contain their anger no more. The burning of the ruling party's headquarters in Cairo is perhaps the most symbolic culmination to days of protests across the country. Tens of thousands of Egyptians in the capital ignored the curfew. They attacked police vehicles and set them on fire. With the police unable to control the crowd, the military was called in. Tanks rolled through the streets as thousands chanted for President Hosni Mubarak to step down. They accuse his government of institutionalized corruption, cronyism and repeated vote rigging. In November, the ruling NDP won over 90% of seats in parliamentary elections. The eventual outcome of these protests is still difficult to predict, but one thing is certain. Inspired by the downfall of Tunisia's long-serving president, these acts of defiance suggest Egyptians have lost their fear. A population long seen as being politically apathetic, a country which had given up on bringing political change. In anticipation of the rallies, the government completely shut down the internet on Friday morning and jammed phone networks. The scenes were repeated in Egypt's second city of Alexandria. Police were attacked and their vehicles set ablaze. In the port city of Suez, a wave of stone-throwing youths pelted security vehicles as the drivers tried to escape. There has been no definitive leader of this protest movement. Nobel laureate and pro-reform campaigner Mohammed El-Baradei was one of many people down in a mosque as tear gas and water cannons rained down on the protesters outside. The army traditionally has widespread support among Egyptians, but there is an obvious paradox now that the soldiers have been put in control of security. The country's leader is also its military chief. Mubarak may be dismissing his government, but he's not going anywhere. He remains the focus of anger for Egyptians, who for the first time have made their demands so shockingly clear. Charles Stratford, Al Jazeera.
Pro-Mubarak mobs and thugs do it. Egypt's vice president and their state television continue to blame reporters and extremists and agitators. Watch.
بألوم على بعض.
I actually blame certain friendly nations who have television channels. They're not friendly at all, who have intensified the youth against the nation and the state.
There is a great number of people who have infiltrated them, and there are countless poisonous thoughts that are entering the thoughts of these youths, and many of these youths are actually good.
Maybe there are foreign agendas for the Muslim Brotherhood, agendas for the private political parties, for businessmen.
We need this regime to go.
But in spite of the heavy-handed tactics, the demonstrators show no signs of giving up.
On day one of the demonstrations in Egypt, Nile TV, the state-controlled channel, covered the story, sort of. The reporter talked about a crowd gathering as opposed to protesting over the economy, unemployment, and freedom of speech issues. But there was no mention of politics or President Hosni Mubarak. That's why some Egyptians call Nile TV the Nile TV. The print version of the story varied depending.
هنجيب السباك والنجار ونشطب الحكومة دورين وكل حاجة هتبقى في السليم، مفيش مشكلة إن شاء الله. أنا هضل دايما في خلقتكم، ولو مش عاوزيني أنا عاوزكم، وفي الحقيقة أنا لقيت الحل. إيه رأيكم؟